Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and everything in between. Welcome back to Old Man Rambles. Today, I want to talk about something. I don't know, something. Anyway, this is brought on by an interview that I had heard about with Miyazaki. If you don't know who Hayao Miyazaki is, he is a Japanese filmmaker. He makes animated films. He's best known for making things like Spirited Away, Howl's Moving Castle, Princess Mononoke, Arrietty, Kiki's Delivery Service, Studio Ghibli films. I don't know if like I'm not sure how he relates to Studio Ghibli. I don't know if it's like his company or if you know um, he simply is their head lead animator. I do not know. Just know that he is connected with Studio Ghibli and their films. And in the interview, someone asked him, and I'm going to paraphrase a bit because I don't remember the exact quote. Someone asked him, like when he's making a film, when he's writing a film, how does his thoughts of how the audience will receive his film affect his writing? And his response was, he doesn't think I don't think of the audience at all. He said I make these films for myself. You know, it's up to the audience whether or not they like them. But ultimately, these are my films, my projects. I write them for myself. And there's been a lot of talk lately, especially considering scandals involving certain artists, about death of the author, about removing, the author from their creation, about enjoying a piece of work um, outside of, when you discover that you're the person whose art you love is a bigot or a racist or, a sexual abuser or whatever awful thing you find out about the creator of your work, death of the author, in the removing the author from their work. And I thought of the concept of death of the audience, in that, the art, what kind of art would we receive if the artists made them for the love of their craft? And what kind of got me thinking about this was, when I talked about Muppet Christmas Carol, about how they cut that scene because of their expectations of what the audience wanted. And they cut that one song in that scene from the film, When Love Is Gone, and how, everyone I've spoken to thinks that the addition of that to the film vastly improves it. It is a great scene and should have been kept in, but the studios decided to bring it out. I think of all the times studios have interfered because of what they expect the audience to like, or what, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy. Sam Raimi is a person around my age who's a filmmaker who grew up on the same Spider-Man comics that I did, the Stan Lee and Steve Ditko era of Spider-Man. We grew up loving the same stories, and yet he was left alone for the first two films mostly, and for the third film, the studio interfered. And the third film is definitely the worst of the three, because of studio's interference. The films that are changed because of audience expectation. Um, the Star Wars sequels are a good example of that. People complained about the first film, so they changed the second film. People complained about the second film, so they changed the third film. They changed the script. They changed the script film, film to film to film, based on how the audience's expectations. And there's a flip side to that too. Um, I look at the Star Wars prequels. Um, that doesn't mean that a writer shouldn't accept influence. The original Star Wars trilogy, one of the reasons that it is great is because George Lucas had an editor who would help him craft scenes. And his editor was his wife at the time. So she would push back on him when she thought he was, not doing things correctly. Not I don't know about not doing things correctly, but like she would push back on him. It's like, no, George, you should do it this way, because she was an editor. She knew how to craft scenes better, whereas George was just a writer. And you see in the Star Wars prequels where he had no one to tell him no, and he just kind of went off the rails and did whatever he wanted to, and no one told him that this was a bad idea. You know, that doesn't mean writers should be given free reign. I can give you dozens of other examples of, including some authors. I think Stephen King's a good one. He's written some books that were way too long, just because he's the great Stephen King and no one tells him no. And you know, uh, Robert Jordan in the Wheel of Time series, which, as much as I love it, it's at least one book too long, and probably two or three books too long in that series, because his first 4 or 5 books did so well that the editor stopped telling him to stop going off on mindless tangents. You could easily cut 500 or 600 pages from that and pare it down and make it a bit less unwieldy. So as always, it's not a simple cut and dried sequence. But I look at all the times studios interfere because of audience expectations, because of what they don't want to offend the audience, or they want to cater to certain audience groups and create the maximum viewing potential. Disney just cut something from one of their animated things, because of course Disney can't push the envelope at all. They cut something. It was a queer storyline. I think it might have been transgender storyline. I'm not sure, and it wasn't even the major plot point of whatever story it's going to be. It was like a side thing, and they just ditched it because they didn't want to make waves. And Disney's representation is always very performative and very minimal, because they want to reach the widest audience possible. And I don't know. But yeah, I was just thinking about all these creators who whose work I admire. And honestly, the best ones out there are the ones who make art for their own purposes without worrying about what the audience wants, but who can also accept, words of criticism when they're going too far. I mean, I look at Hayao Miyazaki, I look at Quentin Tarantino, who, makes his own films, and they're out there, but they're good. And there's another film which I'll talk about, which became a cult classic. I was going to talk about it today, but I'll make it for a different day. But yeah, other films where I found that studios have interfered because of audience expectations, because of what they want the audience to think, and for the most part, I think you need to leave these guys alone. I think death of the audience would be a good thing for filmmaking. It would be, I think, in spite of the times you get the things like the Star Wars prequels, I think ultimately we would end up with better films if these people were mostly left alone to make the films they wanted. They're the artists, not the studios. The audience isn't an artist either. We're just consuming the art. Let the artists make their art, and let us decide whether or not we like it. So yeah, death of the audience. That's what I want to talk about. Good hunting.